And it's just wonderful to be able to do this. Tracy, last question.
My question is kind of about truth in advertising, and essentially the yes is calling this yes to affordable groceries. Can you both talk about that as to whether you believe that is true or if that's kind of misleading?
Sure.
Haddad, we'll let Haddad start with this one. 20 seconds.
20 seconds? It's I don't want to cuss. It is misleading because we're in a church. It is misleading as hell. You hear that, and there was a lady that was like, I can't buy potatoes anymore. That's not true. It's because of the soda tax industry and the soda industry being like, hey, if we fool you into thinking that the city is taxing your meat, then you're gonna vote no against your own interest. It's lying, and it's outright lying, and we need to find a way to regulate that.
20 seconds, Brandon.
Let me explain to you why. Let me explain to you why it is about groceries, right? So for small businesses, mom and pop stores like Yes Markets, Apple Markets, because the soda tax got placed on distributors, they've had to raise their prices across the board. So for big corporations like Walmart, Safeway, they don't have to raise their prices, but it's those small businesses that are owned by parents and families.
Final questions. I'll get to them in a second. If you want to defer, you don't have a question, then we're going to move on. Okay, then that is it. Thank you. How about a round of applause? So now you have time, 2 minutes apiece. You went first, so you have the opportunity now to go first or second for your final thoughts and your closing statement. Would you like to go now, or would you like to go second?
I can go now.
You want to go now?
Yeah.
Oh, you're on. Final thought, you have 2 minutes. And remember, folks, this is the opportunity. You're going to get a brief chance to ask questions here. These final thoughts hopefully will, and I'm telling them as well, make this make sense to you.
Thank you for that. Thank you all so much for coming and staying and listening to us, and thank you for coming and talking. So I just wanted to go ahead and go back to saying how much money across the United States the soda has been defeating soda taxes, because they know that if every single person, every single state and city and local municipality gets it, that's game over for them and healthier people for us. I just want to talk about the sugary tax a little bit. So the sugary beverage tax, once it passed, and we worked with the city to make sure that 51% of that money is going to food programs like Fresh Bucks. What is Fresh Bucks? Good question. Fresh Bucks is a dollar-to-dollar match at farmer markets and now Safeway. This program is dedicated to promoting healthier eating habits that low-income communities, especially those with chronic health issues, can also receive prescriptions on Fresh Bucks from their physicians. So this is a program to make sure that that money that's going out of our pockets and into the city is actually going back to you, to make sure that you can show up at a farmer's market and be like, I have $20. I would like to buy enough healthy food to last me however many days. You go in there and there's like a match for that. You can go there with $100 and there's a $100 match for you to buy those groceries that are important to you and that are healthy for you. And you're probably thinking, what if I want soda? I went to the store the other day and I bought a bunch of soda. So I make sure that money goes into our communities, and we make sure that we can continue to be healthy. And they're going to keep talking to you about how this is going to tax your potatoes and chicken and all that. And none of that is true. And if we had a way to regulate and make sure that the people who are giving those, when you read the ads, it never once says sponsored by Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and all your friendly soda companies. It's hidden by regular people who look like us, people who we love and who we want to continue to support, so that it disguises it and gives you the impression that it's not something that's good for you. They're trying to make sure that nothing else nothing else like this passes.
Thank you, Brandon. Opportunity for closing statements. You have 2 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And by now, you know I will interrupt you.
I know you will, and I count on it. Thank you. I appreciate it. So let's bring this down, right? What I really want people to take away from this is that we can all agree that soda is bad for us. Nobody is debating that, right? What I'm saying is that when we live in one of the wealthiest states in this country, with one of the most regressive tax structures, there's a lot of rich people that live in Seattle, a lot of them. Housing prices over here, $700,000. You know what I'm saying? I just think that there's a better way to fix these problems than taxing our own communities. That's all I'm saying. I don't believe that you should expand amazing programs like FreshBucks on the backs of the people who benefit from them, especially when, and then let's think about, I just like to hold this in contrast because this keeps me up at night. Where was the outrage from so many other communities when the head tax came up, right? When the head tax came up, people were so angry. We should not be taxing businesses, right? For the amount of employees that they have. But when it comes to the soda tax, that has been proven to disproportionately affect our communities, those same people are silent. Same situation. The fact that Starbucks lattes, and we all know who drinks Starbucks, are exempted. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. It's just the people who can afford it drink it, right? So that they want to protect those profits. If they really cared about our health outcomes, it would have been taxed and not exempted. So to me, the fact that soda prices in mom and pop shops that are owned by families have made every other grocery price rise, and the fact that big corporations can still survive like Walmart, and the fact that they raised more than double what they were expecting off of us to raise and expand programs that are to benefit us is backwards.
That is time.
I don't work for Walmart. By the way. I don't know how you
Again, another round of applause.
I didn't.
And I want to have an opportunity to quickly, and we're going to get 940 up here next. This is amazing that we're in this community and we're having a discussion about about a ballot party, about the initiatives, and a wonderful crowd, and we're going over time. But anybody have any questions that they want to ask about 1634? I know that was a lot of information, so just tell us your name and give us your question. And I apologize if I will interrupt you to get brief, but I want to make sure we get a question in. Go ahead.
My name's Candace Johnson, and I have two questions. One, where's the other 49% of the money raised by the tax going? And secondly, why do the small businesses have to pay their taxes twice? So if they purchase the items, they have to pay taxes to purchase them. And then once they sell their items, they have to pay taxes again. And if it's a non-milk item, then they're basically paying double tax. And where's that money going? And if they try to apply for an exemption, they don't qualify. So I don't understand that. So can you explain it a little better for me?
30 seconds from each of you.
The other money, the other percentage, 49%, 48% of the other money is going into schools. I think, I wish Tanika was here. She could have given you a better answer, and I can give you information, get you that situation covered. It's going towards education and other like community benefits programs, and we will fight the city if they try to do something else with it. I'm sorry about the businesses part, because if soda companies were here and they were cared about us and they're walking in step with us, they pay the tax themselves, and they wouldn't have to burden mom and pop stores who are only trying to survive in this super expensive city by passing down that tax. And that just shows me they don't care about us. They don't care about anyone else but
Brandon,
themselves.
30 seconds.
So you're exactly right? And let's think about it in terms of this is bigger than Seattle. We in Seattle enjoy the privilege of being able to go to our city council and telling them, oh no, we're not going to do that. But I worry about the kids in Federal Way and the kids in Spokane and the kids in other communities around this state that don't have the same representation and strong community partners as we enjoy here. And there is no guarantee that those dollars will be going anywhere to benefit them. Anywhere. This is more than us. It's more than soda. It's about these kids and these families.
All right. I have time for maybe one more question. Does anyone else have a question? We have a question over here. Okay, this will be it. This is awesome. Thank you guys for participating. One more question.
Hi, this has been a very lively debate, and I am feeling, truthfully speaking, more confused about the initiative than when the debate started. Can you restate what your stance is? Because I am confused.
Brandon, 30 seconds. We'll start both of you. Brandon, we'll give you 30 seconds on this one, and then Haddad.
Yes. So my stance is yes on 1634, which would essentially eliminate the ability for other local governments, has no effect on Seattle soda tax, to raise or create taxes on any type of grocery, whether it be soda, food, poultry, anything like that. That is what a yes vote for 1634 is.
And Haddad.
And I'm here to tell you to vote no. And a no vote is basically saying, actually, soda companies, you don't care about us. You target us with your ads. You make us pay all this money so you can continue to get rich. And we want the opportunity to be able to tax those and use that money to have the opportunity for everybody else in the state to do the same. And that is not going to impact Seattle. But I also want to say there are organizations who are organized in other places in the city. Seattle's not the only place that holds their people accountable. There are community organizations who will do that. And it's not our job to decide what for them what they want.
And time. That's it for 1634. And thank you, Juan Cotto, Brandon, Haddad, Tracy. Thank you all for being here. We're going to change and we're going to have a discussion about 940. Continue to talk about this. Again, I hope you have a better understanding now. You have your ballots. For those of you who are watching us, this is a ballot party. We're at Atlantic Street Center's Family Resource Center, and we're doing it. We got tons of food here. If you haven't eaten, eat now. If you haven't eaten and you're not here, come down and grab something to eat. And bring your ballot with you. We'll help you with an understanding to get information. We've got a bunch of folks here who are for and against. We've got some folks here who just say, I'm here to explain. I want to say thanks to OneAmerica for being here. And if we can get 940 up here now. Is that you, Chris? 940? And Rick? Okay, we're about ready to get started here. This is wonderful conversation. If I can get everyone to again kind of settle down and we can begin this conversation. Thank you for all of the lively discussion that's taking place. We are now going to talk about Measure 940. And we do have one side here. I will tell you that we made an aggressive attempt to get both sides here for this conversation because of the level of importance. And I can't disparage one side for not being here because of the impact on our community, but I am glad to see that there is a side here to discuss this important measure. And so you kind of know how this works when you have one side. This time we actually, the other side said that they could not come. So we're going to be talking about Measure 940, and here to do that is a gentleman who's also the director for our sports department at Rainier Avenue Radio. He's also he's also on the board here at the Atlantic Street Center, and a legend in sports radio.
I have no idea who Tony's talking about there, but my name is Rick Dupree. Okay, and okay. So real quickly, what is Initiative 940? So I'm gonna read just a little bit to hopefully clarify, and then we will talk a little bit from the for 940 side and have some discussion. This is the Deadly Force Initiative. So Initiative 940 basically would create a good faith test to determine when the use of deadly force by police is justifiable. It'll require police to receive de-escalation and mental health training, and provide that police have a duty to render medical or render first aid. So it would remove the requirement that prosecutors show that a law enforcement officer acted with malice to be convicted. So that in a nutshell is what it is. Okay, so again, it would create a good faith test to determine when the use of deadly force by police is justifiable, require police to receive de-escalation and mental health training, and provide that police have a duty to render first aid. It would remove the requirement that prosecutors show that law enforcement officer acted with malice to be convicted. So right now, if an officer, there has to be shown that they had malice. And you know, again, part of the argument is how do you show that? And so again, removing that so that it from a, well, you know what, I should let the four sides, since I said, oh yeah, you know, talk a little bit about. So why don't you, from your perspective,
Well,
introduce yourself?
this will be the opening statement. And
Okay.
it will be 2 minutes, and you'll be held to the same deal with the questions that Rick has. You'll get 2 minutes. There is nobody here to rebut, but we want to make sure that we keep the flow going, so there will still be a timer. Rick will ask your question, and you'll get your 2 minutes, and then it may turn into 1 minute depending on where we're at. But it'll be kind of the same way. And Rick, it's on you.
All right. Well, you have your. Go ahead and have your 2 minutes. So go ahead with that. Introduce yourself, and then give us your 2 minutes.
So thank you all, everyone, for being here. My name is Chris Lampkin. I am on the leadership team of De-Escalate Washington, who got 360,000 signatures throughout the state of Washington. This was a grassroots campaign led by impacted families of people who had lost loved ones due to police violence. Nothing like this had been done before. You saw a bunch of initiatives earlier today. That's big organizations who get those signatures. This was families, people from the tribes, people from Seattle, people from Yakima, Spokane, Tacoma, who had lost people because they realized that we ask a lot of our police officers, and you wouldn't expect your police officers to protect you with no ammunition, with no bulletproof vests. But every day we ask them to go out there without the training they need to keep us safe. No one wants to hesitate if you have a family member in mental crisis, who to call. But right now, because there is a lack of trust between our communities and the law enforcement communities, we hesitate to pick up the phone because those of us in this room know what might happen. I-940 takes crucial first steps in building a bridge between law enforcement and community so we can build that trust. So in a crisis, if you have a loved one who might be having a mental health crisis, you don't hesitate who to call because you know your police officers, who will be your first responders, have the training to keep everyone safe. I'm here to tell you all that a yes on 940 is a yes to save lives here in the state of Washington.
All right, let me take just a couple of minutes, if I can, to try to give a little bit of information on the side that is against. See if we can make some clarity, and then we can have a little bit more of a discussion. It says during the creation of Initiative 940 was framed to be supported by law enforcement, and that is in fact there is some law enforcement leadership that does endorse it. But the opposition is saying, however, groups that represented the most peace officers in the state, including Washington Fraternal Order of Police, Washington Council of Police, and sheriffs, have stood in opposition. And their main focus, they're saying, is the around policy language. And they're saying that the language of the initiative is flawed. And so I tried to get some understanding of what exactly they meant there. And so some of it is they're saying that representatives from states' major law enforcement groups work with leaders of de-escalate to create a more comprehensive and a collaborative policy that is what they say good for public safety. So, again, there doesn't seem to be opposition that there is training that's needed. There does not seem to be opposition that this is certainly something that is lacking. What the opposition, everything I have found at least, is saying that they have a problem with the language and with how it will be implemented. And so again, some of that, here is something that I found very interesting. It says the compromise language would improve. Well, let me take a step back. The result of the work that I mentioned a moment ago was HB 3003, which represented reform that both peace officers and community members agreed upon. That policy apparently, they say, has received support and input from both sides of the issue, including the sponsor of I-940. Is that correct?
De-Escalate Washington. Yes.
Is that okay? Which is correct. The compromise language improves on what was seen as faulty policy in the current ballot measure, which is I-940. And it says improvements developed in the HB 3003 allow for enforcement of the training standard to be administered by the employing agency. It said this revision would prevent an officer from being decertified through no fault of his or her own, which could happen in the cases of military deployment or other unforeseen scenarios. And well, we can talk about that. I have a question about that. It says, additionally, revised policy clarified language that had the unintended consequence of requiring a peace officer to render first aid to the individual they came in contact with prior to securing the scene or attending to other injured innocent individuals. So those are that's some of the language around the opposition. And I guess as we go in, I would ask that you would let's comment about some of that, kind of a rebut, if you will, of some of that I just discussed. And you'll have 2 minutes for that.
Yeah, happy to do that. Again, this initiative is a grassroots-led, community-led initiative by families who had lost loved ones. By no means is this the last be-all measure we need to take to make sure our communities are safe. But without a yes on 940 vote, I do not believe the legislature will feel the same urgency that our communities feel. And the leadership of De-Escalate Washington that is championing yes on 940 stands by the commitment and the work we did in the legislative session to hammer out that compromise bill, HB 3003. But I agree with the Seattle Times that without a yes on 940, that same urgency that we feel every day when we send our children out into the streets saying, is this going to be the day I get that phone call? That the legislature might not feel that same urgency and say, we need to do this now, which is why I say we need a yes vote on 940, and we will be at the table with our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, ironing out the policy things that they pointed out to us to make sure that this also works for them. Because we want our police officers to be the best trained, the best equipped when it comes to protecting everybody, because we want to save lives for everyone. Now, you also asked me about first aid. That's one of the things we hear a lot about. But what I also hear a lot about is from the families who had loved ones when they called law enforcement because something was wrong. Something went wrong when the law enforcement showed up. They had to use deadly force, and the loved one died in the streets. They bled out while law enforcement watched. The reason that first aid is in there is to prevent anyone else saying, could there have been something done to save my loved one who was experiencing a mental health crisis? They shouldn't have to die in the street like animals.
Yeah. And the argument
If your license plate is BKC 8298, you are blocking a driveway and you have to move your car before you get towed. We don't want you to get towed. So if BKC 8298, you're blocking a driveway. I'm sorry, Rick. We don't want anybody to
getting
get
my
towed.
time. What's up with no? Anyway, so the question with the first aid question, and part of what the opposition is saying is that it would require police officers to render first aid before the scene is secure. Is that accurate or not?
I can speak that, I've got cops in my family. My cousin I grew up with is a cop. The day-to-day life of a police officer and public safety officer is not what is portrayed in our action movies, God forbidding, with their weapons drawn or there's an active shooter situation, but it is not like a Rambo type situation where there are bad guys after bad guys gunning for them. And what the opposition would like people to think is that they would shoot a bank robber and then have to apply first aid before that bank robbery scene is secured. That's not what happens on a regular basis. What happens on a regular basis, way too regular, is someone is being misunderstood because of behavioral health crises or a language barrier or because someone is disabled and they are shot and police will let them bleed out. So we have a choice. Do we think that police should render first aid to the people who might have been injured in a police encounter? Or do we think that every day police go into an action movie and there's going to be 20 bad guys with AKs trying to rob a bank? Now, the reason we are committed to the changes in 3003 is because we want our police to be set up for success. Because when they fail, we all fail.
So does the passing of I-940 lock in that language, or as you just said, there is room for discussion and improvement of how it will be implemented? Because the opposition is making it seem as though if you vote yes for I-940, that you're locked into the exact language and there can't be changes made and you can't use common sense, if you will, to make improvements as you just described.
It was the power of the impacted communities that led a campaign to get 360,000 signatures to send this to the legislature. For years, the legislature did nothing to address the fact that people were dying in the streets. Nothing. When we sent those signatures to the legislature, that was a catalyst for people to take action. We entered into negotiation with the law enforcement community in good faith, and we are going to live up to our words when we say we will remain committed to make those changes this next legislative session after we pass 940. But I want to also be very clear that both of those steps are not the end of it. We will continue to work in partnership to make sure everyone in Washington State, be you black, white, brown, experiencing a mental health crisis, having a disability, no matter what it is, you should be able to look to your police officers, your law enforcement community, and know they are there to protect and serve you. And if there is a crisis, you should not have to hesitate to call them.
So the opposition also is saying that 1 minute, okay. The opposition is saying that the current language uses, or there's both an objective and a subjective test, which creates a difficult training standard. And is that accurate? And if so, what can be done to make sure that it is not a difficult training standard, but very simple to understand?
The language included in the initiative is already in place in 27 other states. These are other states that have far fewer police killings than Washington State. We rank 45th in the nation in terms of police shootings. Do we want to be at the bottom of the list or at the top of not having police kill in police encounters? We want to be at the top of the list because one is too many. And we need to be able to ask ourselves, what are we doing to get us towards that top of the list? Because I'm not okay with being at the bottom.
A couple of factual things, and I want to just give some personal opinion, have your comment on a couple of situations that we're familiar with that have happened in the news. Number one, though, the news is saying, or there are facts are saying that last year, Washington State, more people were killed in encounters with law enforcement than in 45 other states. And almost a third of those killed were individuals that were experiencing some type of mental health crisis. Also, we talk about de-escalation. A couple of situations. All of you probably remember Eric Garner in New York City. And as police came on him, he was alleged to be selling single cigarettes, so illegally selling cigarettes. And for that, the end result was he was killed. And so we talk about de-escalation and how important is it? Well, I guess the question would be, what is the type of de-escalation training that that police officers are getting now, and what would 940 require in addition to what is happening now?
So a great thing about 940 actually creates a lot of opportunity for the law enforcement community to have that input in the rulemaking process. So it's not someone who doesn't do the work coming in saying, I think I know better than you. It actually creates the opportunity to create a standard across the state of saying, this is what we need to be successful, right? Same thing with law enforcement officers saying, I need this kind of vest, right? I need this kind of car to be able to do my job. And right now there's no standard across the state. So you might get 8 hours coming out of the academy, and that could be the only de-escalation training that you ever receive after that. And it's one of these things that if you don't use it, you might lose it. And so being able to set up with law enforcement input, continuing and on training to make sure that they are ready for whatever challenge they might encounter every day.
So another situation some of you may have heard of, may not, earlier this year, Milwaukee Bucks player Sterling Brown. He was, it was about 2 a.m. and he parked illegally across a couple of parking spots. They were handicapped spots. I believe it was at a Walgreens or some store like that. And again, 2 a.m., no other cars in the lot. And as we talk about the ability to either de-escalate or escalate, police came up, and as the video showed, tried to stop. And from the very start, the police officer was pretty belligerent and was very disrespectful. And this young man said, hey, I'm just trying to get to my car. He remained calm the whole time. Pretty quickly, the officer called for backup. Probably 4 or 5 other police cars came. He ended up getting surrounded, tased. They were yelling, get your hands out of your pockets. And, again, as you talk about, in the big scheme of things, now granted, he shouldn't have been parked in a handicap or blocking a couple of spots. It's 2 a.m. who's going to be there to park? Who's that going to block? But would de-escalation training help in a situation? Say, you know what? Okay, I recognize the situation. It's illegal. Pardon me. I'm making a statement. There'll be a question in just a moment. No, I got the no. Anyway, so now you lost, maybe lose my train. No, but you have a situation where again, a police officer came in instead of, it wasn't even there was no situation there. And so it wasn't a matter of de-escalation. It was a matter of this police officer came in and same thing with Eric Garner, and they escalated the situation. And so I guess a question going back to the training and the expectation, what is the expectation of the backers of I-940 that officers approach the community with more respect? Again, in these situations, it wasn't a matter of de-escalating anything. It was a matter of they're the ones that escalated, and they're the ones that caused this. In Sterling Brown's case, fortunately, that he was injured, but they were, he wasn't killed. There was no shooting or anything like that. So what is the expectation for the backers of I-940 in terms of training along those lines?
The expectation is that better training will build bridges to build that trust. When you don't know who your law enforcement officers are and they don't know who you are, our hackles get up, right? Because the way we are conditioned as a community is that law enforcement interactions can go sideways real quickly. And that means that if something bad happens, we're not going to be quick to call them because things can go bad real quickly. But with more training and better communication and de-escalation of situations, we can actually build that understanding where law enforcement shows up and I'm able to say, you're right, I was acting like a knucklehead. I parked in a handicapped spot. I shouldn't have done that, officer. I know you, you know me, and we're able to have a conversation. But if we don't know each other and we can't build those bridges and have that trust, it's not the one-on-one interactions that we're just talking about. It's as an entire community, those interactions are magnified and things can go bad quickly. So we want to make sure that with better training and de-escalation, we can go up to a law enforcement officer, know that I'm going to be okay.
Can training help? Because I don't see anything in I-940 talking about, oftentimes you hear police officers say, I feared for my life, and there is a perception they have, especially of African-American men. So what, if anything, in the training addresses those issues? Again, because I wonder in these situations that I just mentioned with Eric Garner, with Sterling Brown, if they would have been Caucasian and dressed in a suit and tie, would the outcome have been the same?
I mean, I think it is undeniable that implicit bias plays a role in a lot of interactions in our country, and that is a fact. But I know that if we can train our law enforcement officers to use their firearms properly, we can train our law enforcement officers to use their words properly and talk through situations that could quickly end in a tragedy and actually have those end in successes where people are understood and set up to move on with their day and go home to their families. Because at the end of the day, this initiative was created by families who lost loved ones. And with better de-escalation training, they want to make sure that no one else has to join that club of families who started this initiative, because it's a tight-knit group and they don't want it to get any bigger.
So we're going to go to the audience in just a moment as Tony gets ready, but I will ask you this while he's getting prepared, and that is in terms of mental health. How can 10 hours or 20 hours of training prepare somebody to deal with mental health? They're not going to be mental health counselors. So how do you really, will training make a difference in situations dealing with individuals that are mentally, have mental illness?
Absolutely, and that's why the National Association of Mental Illness here in Washington State has endorsed this initiative because, like you said, 1/3 of the individuals who have lost their lives to police in the last several years were experiencing some sort of mental health crisis. And if you're in crisis, you want to reach out for help. And you want to know the person you're reaching out to has the training. And we ask our police and law enforcement community to do more and more. And if we're not giving them the training and the resources they need, we're basically telling them to do more with less. And that's unfair on them. And as the community that pays taxes and gives them the resources they need, we should take it on ourselves to make sure that we are actually giving them an accomplishable mission, right?
All right, and you have 2 minutes now, Chris, for your final words, your final statement, your closing statement.
Again, thank you all for being here. This entire initiative has been an incredible process, watching the power of what can come together when families have been impacted and bringing in some of the larger traditional players in our state, but actually having the voices of family front and centered, because that's what this is about. Making sure that families can actually expect to have their loved ones come home every day, right? After a long day of work, be it if you're a law enforcement officer, if you're a student going to the local corner store to get some iced tea and Skittles, you should be able to come home to your family, because no one wants to get that phone call. And this is why we were so incredibly thrilled to have 360,000 Washingtonians sign the initiative last year saying, I want to stand up. I want to do something. This is why we're so thrilled to have volunteers making phone calls, sending texts, knocking on doors, talking to their local community about why they should be voting for yes on 940. And this is why we are so incredibly thrilled to continue the work to build bridges between our community and law enforcement to make sure at the end of the day, everyone can come home safe.
Chris, can you, for our audience here and for our listeners, again, remind them what a yes vote means?
A yes vote on I-940 means that you want to save lives. It means that law enforcement gets the training they need to de-escalate situations. And it means that when you send your family members out in the community every day, that you can feel confident knowing that if they have an interaction with law enforcement is going to know how to deal with them and they can come home safely. So vote yes on I-940.
All right, how about a big round of applause for Chris, and then also for Mr. Dupree, not only moderating, playing devil's advocate on the 940 road too. And for those of you who are listening out there and watching, we've been broadcasting now for 2.5 hours, talking about politics, talking about issues that impact and affect in our communities. And just for those of you who are out there, I want you to hear this, the number of people in the room. We've been already, again, almost 2.5 hours. On the count of 3, if you're in the room, let's make some noise for what we're doing here today. 1, 2, 3. This is what's going on in the Atlantic Street Center. Now we want to get 1639 up here. So if we can get the folks engaged and involved in 1639 to come up and have a seat up here. You got a minute or 3. And we'll be back with you very shortly in a couple of minutes. Okay, we're going to get started here. So this is Initiative 1639, and been a lot of talk about this and questions about where the support is coming from, because this involves guns. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I would like to begin by introducing Sarah Franklin. And would you mind saying a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Franklin Phillips, and I want to first thank the Atlantic Street Center, Family Center, for inviting me to participate in what I believe is my civic duty, to be engaged in the community. I live in the city of Kent. I am a community activist, but most importantly, a community advocate. I serve on a couple of nonprofits that work on social and economic justice issues. I also represent the South King County on the Washington State Commission on African American Affairs and serve as on the Health Disparities Council representing the commission. So I'm happy to be here and to be moderating this debate on 1639.
Okay, for those, if you may be unfamiliar how this works, the way this works is you get a 2-minute opening statement. Again, there's not a person here on the other side, but we will of course continue this conversation, and you'll be asked questions. You'll again be subject to a time limit to answer those questions. There won't be an opportunity for a rebuttal. It'll just be you. And we want to give those listeners out there a chance to find out what's going on with 1639. Having said that, would you like to begin the conversation by telling us about 1639 and then proceed with the question?
Yes. So 1639 is retaining to increase public safety by implementing fire safety measures. And there are several things that have been placed in the ballot on the initiative for background checks, waiting periods, and increasing the age requirements. And so that is just in a nutshell what 1639 is. Stephen, I am going to ask you, how did we get to this place on initiative 1639?
Sure, and I'll start by just introducing myself to everyone. My name is Stephen Paolini, and I'm the campaign manager for Initiative 1639. For me, this story began, I was actually raised in Orlando, Florida, and I moved up to Washington State about 2.5 years ago, shortly before the Pulse nightclub shooting killed 43 of my neighbors and injured 53 more. And so that was the start of my journey on gun violence prevention. I also happen to be 22 years old, and in my very limited lifespan, over 200,000 students have been impacted by school shootings, predominantly with firearms that are commonly referred to as semi-automatic assault rifles, like AR-15s and AK-47s. And the reality is, in the state of Washington, that it is currently easier to purchase an AR-15 than it is to purchase a handgun. No, really. You have to be 21 years old, go through a 5-day waiting period and a more advanced local law enforcement background check to purchase a handgun. But none of that is required before purchasing an AR-15. So this initiative, it really started actually in 1999. That was the first year that a component of this initiative was introduced into the legislature. And there have been repeated failures, most poignantly last year, where this bill was in front of the legislature and they killed it the day of the Parkland shooting. And that sparked a movement for us to put this on the ballot and to restore some sanity to our state.
So when we talk about the measure and the different components of the measure, there are the raising of the minimum wage, raising of the age and the background check. Can you go a little further into what some of those are, like the waiting period and the age requirement?
Yeah, so there's really two big components to this initiative. There's stuff that is really about raising the standard to purchase a semi-automatic assault rifle to what's already required for handguns. And so it does that by making the age to purchase 21, again, already required for handguns, enforcing a waiting period, which is commonly referred to as sort of a cooling down period. States with those kinds of waiting periods actually see 17% less homicides and 10% less suicides. And a more local, up-to-date law enforcement background check that helps to really make sure that we get the most up-to-date records on domestic violence cases, on extreme risk protection orders, and a few things that take longer to percolate up to the federal database, that we have better records here at Washington state level. So that's kind of one category, and that's most of the firearm regulations. In addition, it creates something called safe storage, which would essentially tell gun owners, and I actually am a gun owner myself, with your actions come consequences. If you decide to store your firearm in an egregiously and negligent, irresponsible way, and that leads to a child or a prohibited person gaining access to that firearm and using it in a crime, like is the case actually in 80% of all mass shootings, then you can be held accountable for that. So it creates a kind of crime called community endangerment due to unsafe storage of a firearm. And it holds gun owners accountable and incentivizes them to use really basic but safe storage methods like trigger locks or safe boxes and that kind of thing.
So if the gun owner, what would be that penalty if that weapon was taken or used by somebody who was not authorized or otherwise should not have that, what would be the penalty for the gun owner if that were to happen?
Yeah, so it's a sliding scale, and it starts with as low as a gross misdemeanor, and it can dial up depending on how egregious the case to be a Class C felony. And so in the prosecutor community, we actually have the endorsement of the King County, Snohomish County, Whatcom County prosecutors. We have the endorsement of the Attorney General, all because they recognize, and actually Dan Satterberg, the King County prosecutor, said that the number one gun violence prevention related tool that we can give law enforcement is this kind of safe storage liability, because it tells gun owners, if you are going to take that risk in keeping a loaded firearm out in the open in arm's reach of your child or somebody that is legally not allowed to have access to it, then you can face some serious penalties as a result of that. So those penalties, they kind of scale, but a Class C felony can range between 0 to 12 months in jail, and it carries a fee, and I forget the amount, but it's in the voter's guide.
Thank you. And going with that, what are the responsibilities or added responsibilities to the gun dealers if this initiative passes?
Yeah, so there's no real additional, well, actually, I'm sorry, you pointed that to a really good component, which is what we refer to in the gun violence prevention community as a Surgeon General's warning. So similar to when you buy a pack of cigarettes and you get a warning that says, this increases your likelihood of cancer or susceptibility to heart disease or whatever else, gun dealers would be required to do two things. Number one, they'd be required to provide information to prospective gun buyers about the inherent risks of firearm ownership, which is, for example, that in homes with firearms in them, there's 5 times more likelihood to see domestic violence. And suicide, susceptibility and that kind of thing. And the second thing is they would be required to offer some kind of safe storage device, whether that be a trigger lock, a breacher, a safe box, etc. But they would be required to both educate gun dealers, gun buyers on, the inherent risks of firearm ownership, as well as provide those safe storage tools.
And the opposition, those opposing this initiative, would say that this is not going to stop the kind of violence.
Yeah.
And that there seems to be more support for increased security in the schools, some other method rather than this type of initiative. How would you speak to that?
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of truth to the idea that we're not too far off now from the Pittsburgh shooting, an example of what happens when hate has easy access to firearms. And to me, that's very much what happened in the Pulse nightclub shooting in the world. And 1639 won't stop that. But what it can do is it can help to disarm it. It can help to make it just a little bit harder for hateful people to gain access to military-grade firearms that, when used in crimes, contribute to 60% more deaths, 80% more injuries. Laws and states actually, with these kinds of laws in 1639, like I said, they reduce homicides by 17%, suicides by 10%, accidental shootings by 26%. A vast majority of all mass shootings are due to not the actual legal gun owner using it in a crime, but somebody gaining access to an irresponsibly stored firearm. So we can stop that, right? In the case of the Parkland shooting, that's a 19-year-old kid that gained access to an unsafely stored firearm that his parents owned. Yes. And we can do something about that. We can make it so he can't purchase it, like Alan Ivanov did in Mukilteo 2 years ago, when he killed 3 just recent graduates from high school and injured several others. And we can make sure that parents know, if you've got a kid in the home, you got to keep it out of their hands. If you've got somebody that is prohibited from purchasing a firearm, you have to keep it out of their hands. And so we can prevent crime.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the fact that you're here and you're speaking on behalf of this initiative. I think it helps to really unpack some of the language of the initiative and so many others that we've heard tonight. And so I'd like to ask you, just kind of wrapping up, is there any additional information you'd like to provide and tell us about? We don't have the opposing side here, but I'm
Sure.
trying to do the best to make sure all sides are being heard as best possible.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And there has been quite a bit of misinformation. You know, I was joking actually at a forum the other day. A friend of mine, they also did not show up. So you guys are not don't take it personally. I've been all over the state of Washington. I literally traveled all the way to Tri-Cities for a debate, and they didn't show up there either. But my friend joked, it's a good thing because the devil doesn't need more advocates. And the reality is there's been a lot of misinformation. There's arguments about what this does to privacy and medical records. The answer is it does literally nothing that isn't already required for handguns. There's arguments about if somebody breaks into your home and tries to steal your firearm, are you then on the hook for a Class C felony? Absolutely not. The third part of the initiative literally says, if a firearm was obtained due to unlawful entry and you report it within 5 days of knowing or reasonably where you should have known that somebody gained access to it, you face zero liability. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's hard. You know, I don't know if you guys had a chance to hear the radio ad that the NRA ran. I mean, it starts with glass crashing and screams and sirens rolling. And at one point they asked people to, you know, close their eyes and imagine somebody breaking into their home. That's the kind of thing that we're fighting up against. And so I do appreciate being here and having a chance to talk to you guys.
Thank you. Yes. So we've talked about the gun dealers and the gun owners, and we've had a lot of conversation around kids and who's most affected by this. How do you get this message to kids? How do you have them to understand the importance and realize, you know, how guns affect their generation? Young people are the most impacted by gun violence. How do you have that conversation?
Well, the good news actually is they are having the conversation.
Yes.
So in many ways, we just got to get out of the way.
Yes.
You know, we have so many amazing leaders in the gun violence prevention space that are young kids who have said to legislators, I mean, this is something I want to go back to because, like I said earlier, when this initiative, when one of the components was first introduced in the legislature, I was 3 years old. And in that time span, the legislature has failed over and over and over and over again to say that they care anything at all about my life and my generation and what we're defined by. And we have been defined by gun violence. And so this initiative actually is an opportunity to empower young voices and say, and I really feel like folks in my generation are doing it.
Yeah.
We're out in front of it. We don't need to, you know, be given anything. We're taking it ourselves. We just need you to get out of the way a little bit. And we want to tell legislators, if you're not going to do this, if you're not going to keep our communities and our schools safe, we'll do it ourselves.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thanks so much, guys, for bringing me here. I was so glad also to see De-Escalate on the stage. I was actually the field director for De-Escalate Washington in gathering the 360,000 signatures. What an amazing effort. Initiative 1639 was similar, actually. We gathered over 378,000 signatures in just 25 days, which is the fastest it's ever been done before in the history of the state of Washington. It was an outpouring of just the most amazing volunteer energy I've ever seen. And there were high school students like Ola Jackson, who lives not far from here in Rainier Beach, who collected almost 1,000 signatures in 25 days. That's a 17-year-old senior at Rainier Beach High School that was able to say, our lawmakers aren't taking a stand for me, so I'll do it myself. I'll collect the signatures myself. And she did it. And so it's amazing to be a part of this. I think we're making history. We're so lucky in the state of Washington to have these initiatives on the ballots that we can have an open and honest conversation about these laws that we think will save lives. We're actually the only state in the country with a gun violence prevention law on the ballot. So we're incredibly lucky, and I hope everyone hones in on that. And however you feel about this issue, exercise that vote. Tell your legislators how you feel. Our goal from the beginning is not just to win. We want to win so big that legislators feel the ground shifting from underneath them, that if they don't start getting on board with this, they're going to start losing their seats. The good news is, well, folks in my generation will outlive them either way. But hopefully we can get it done. And I think Initiative 1639 will actually put us in the top 5 safest states in the country. to gun violence. And that's a huge deal that we can accomplish right here and right now in the next 3 days, whatever. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
All right, a big round of applause. Again, on a very important issue. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Tell me your name again. Stephen. Do we have any questions from the audience? Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay. I'm gonna do it going once. This was a tough. Do you feel? I'll tell you, we really did make a concerted effort to get the other side here, and they eventually just said they weren't coming. And I don't want to make that mean anything more than what I just said, is that we made a concerted effort and they just said they weren't coming. Did we have a question? Oh, wait a second. Janet.
It wasn't for this initiative, but it was the last one, because I'm really concerned about who is going to be doing the investigating for these police officers. Just to say independent, that's not enough for me. And I need to know, are they going to come out into the community and get people from the community, or are they going to just go and get random people to be on the panel? Because to me, you could get his cousin, not knowing it's his cousin, that you're having him on the panel to investigate him for doing the crime. So I just need a little more clarification on that.
Sure.
Now, they may not be the ones who can tell you about that. Oh, well then you go ahead, man. That's how that good. Thank you, Janet. We got room in here. You have 1 minute.
Great. All right. So Initiative 940 actually establishes an oversight committee within the legislature, specifically with regard to the training and de-escalation training, the development of that curriculum. But it outlines certain buckets that have to be a part of both independent investigations as well as the development of that curriculum. And those groups are those that are disproportionately impacted by police violence. And there are many of the folks that are around the table actually around the organization that put this initiative forward. That's the tribes. That's Disability Rights Washington. That's Equal Rights Washington. That's the ACLU. That's Not This Time, a local nonprofit that came out of the Shea Taylor shooting in Washington State. And so there is a lot of public and community accountability. This is the first time that community has really come forward together with a solution to law enforcement. And so those groups are the ones that are mandated by Initiative 940 to be involved in those investigations, as well as the development of the curriculum.
All right. 3 hours of talking politics on a Friday night. Here at Atlantic Street Center in the Family Resource Center. Thank all of you for coming, and thank all of our folks who did make it out tonight. I mean, this was put together on kind of a short notice, and so I commend our community for coming together and saying in a little over a week, we called folks, we put this together, we partnered with Atlantic Street Center, we partnered with OneAmerica, we all came together because we thought this was important for our community. And so to have these folks come here, I'd really like to thank our moderators, Tracy Klinkroth, who's still here with us, Katie Dong, who's still here with us, Sarah Franklin, and I'm sorry, the last name, Phillips, Sarah Franklin Phillips, who waited patiently to do this, and she's been here a long time. Rick Dupree, Juan Cotto, and it's just been an awesome time. And Atlantic Street Center, and Michelle, thank you so much for your effort in making this happen for our community. We made it happen. And look at the set. I know you can see on the camera, it's beautiful here at Atlantic Street Center as well. It looks fantastic. And we certainly could not have done this without you, the audience. Remember, each of you has a vote. I hope that this helped a little bit. If not, inquire, ask questions. You've met some people here today. You've seen some people. Ask questions of them. I would say, if you hear a commercial, if you hear something on the radio, if you see something on the television, please question it. Please check multiple resources to find out how you feel and what the real thing for you as an individual, if that's what's important to you, as a family, if that's what's important to you, as a community, if that's what's important to you, as a city, if that's what's important to you, if that's a state, or if it's a country. Make your decision based off of informed, I guess, just what's important to you. Again, my name is Tony B. I'm from Rainier Avenue Radio. We've been happy to broadcast this. You'll be able to catch this broadcast on a regular basis again on Facebook. We'll be airing portions of this broadcast, debate number 1 at 1 o'clock and 1:30 on Sunday, and then debates number 3 and 4 at 6:30 and 7 on Rainieravenueradio.world if you want to go back and listen again because you felt like you missed something. So thank you all for joining. Again, a big thanks to Atlantic Street Center for being part of our community for 108 years of wraparound services serving our community, and not the least of which is the decision to say, look, we have to make sure that we provide our community an opportunity to be slightly more or heavily more, at whatever we can do, more informed voters for our community. Is there still food? There is still food, and right now we're going to take these last few minutes that we have here, and we're going to have a little party, I guess, and a little dancing, and one of our DJs from Rainier Avenue Radio, DJ Understanding. Thank you all for joining us. Let's take it to DJ Understanding.
There's been so many things that's held us down, but now it looks like things are finally coming around. I know we've got a long, long way to go,